Events begin to take place at Jiangbei University. This educational institution was one of the most prestigious in the city. In one of the classes there was a beautiful girl who impressed everyone with her beauty. As it turned out, this girl's name was Ling Xiaoqiao, because some strange guy addressed her behind her when he stood with his foot on the desk. Turning around, the lady immediately became embarrassed and wanted to ask the young man who he was. The classmates behind did not understand what kind of hillbilly came to their class, because this guy was so dirty, and he literally made me sick. The brave young man greeted him and exclaimed that he was Ling Xiaoqiao's fiancée. Soon after his words, as if nothing had happened, the country boy immediately decided to kiss his new bride. This confused the girl even more, and she did not understand what was happening, and why this stranger had just kissed her. Such actions literally made Ling Xiaoqiao shiver, and she felt warmth throughout her body. Looking intently straight into the eyes of the young man, the girl exclaimed that she would not allow this to continue to happen. Feeling very embarrassed, Lin decided to push her fiancé away to ask him who he was. Without feeling embarrassed, the guy said that he really was her fiancé, and his name was Zhao Fan. His teacher, who used to be his uncle, wrote to the girl's father and agreed on an arranged marriage. His teacher said that he had already grown up and will be able to find his bride. Unexpectedly, the young man decided to use his superpowers and activated the heavenly gaze directly at his wife. It turned out that there was an aura of death in her body, which was concentrated in the area of the upper body. Although it had not yet fully formed, the Lanyan spirit would be able to contain it, and the hero would still be able to save the girl. Indignant, Lin exclaimed that Zhao was lying to her, because she did not understand what he meant when he talked about the marriage contract, because she did not even know anything about it. In his thoughts, the young man understood that his uncle and grandfather told him that she was the only one with whom he was compatible, and that he had no other choice, but no one said that she could not refuse, because in this way they could destroy the hopes of their relatives. Zhao Fan decided not to show his indignation, and only said that in this case the girl should go and ask her father. Unexpectedly, someone decided to burst into the office and immediately asked the stranger how he dared to kiss his goddess. It was a group of hooligans, and the guy in the center called the main character a damn dog, because Ling Xiaoqiao was his girlfriend. The lady immediately stopped her boyfriend, saying that Wan Renqing shouldn't be so stubborn, because it's her personal matter, so he should leave. Besides, there's nothing between them, so you shouldn't talk so frivolously, otherwise people may be misunderstood. Huang Renqing only laughed at this statement, because he believed that sooner or later they would have a relationship, because he longed for it very much. Watching everything that was happening, the young man realized that he could not simply tolerate such impudence on the part of Huang Renqing. In this connection, the hero decided to reach out with his hand to a pencil and a stationary knife in order to perform one trick. Meanwhile, the hooligans came closer, and Huang didn't understand what was the matter, because Zhao Fan couldn't scare them with this utility knife. The bully even thought that the guy in front of him imagined that the utility knife was Excalibur. Laughing, the boy only exclaimed that the hooligans should not worry, because now he would show them a show. I continue to watch Zhao Fan. Juan didn't understand what he wanted to do, because he saw how this guy sharpens a pencil. But as it turned out, the young man sharpened his pencil for a reason, because he had a plan that he adhered to. At that very second, all the hooligans felt that they could not control their bodies and made completely uncontrollable movements. Because of this, the scoundrels gradually began to take off their outer clothing, while simultaneously shouting that Zhao Fan should stop this now. Such a sight was really funny for the main character. He continued to watch the scoundrels, and was very happy about this outcome of events, although Ling Xiaoqiao did not understand what these shameless people were doing. Students from all classes gathered and gradually began to film everything on camera in order to capture the crazy hooligans taking off their outerwear right in the classroom. One of the men, who also came into the office, noticed the stranger and decided to come to the educational institution. At the same time, the main character has already finished sharpening his pencil using a stationary knife. The troubled bullies were surprised that it was finally over and they could relax. Now Huang Renqing was very angry, because he understood that each of the students at the educational institution was able to film him. Zhao Fan shouted as a bully, that they were advised to stay away from his wife, otherwise he would make them suffer, but the girl was indignant, because she did not understand why this hillbilly calls her his wife. Unable to tolerate such insolence on the part of the hero, the bully began to swing his hand in order to strike the stranger. Suddenly, someone decided to stop Huang Renqing, shouting at him that he shouldn't do this. Angry at this turn of events, the young man did not understand who dared to stop him. As it turned out, this man turned out to be the director, because the bully understood that the director was the mentor of great Jiangbei and the dungeon emperor. He even heard that one day these two important people came to him and bowed their heads, which is why it is impossible to argue with him any reason, and it is better to retreat. Thus, the scoundrel nevertheless decided to turn to the brat. They say that this time he was lucky, but next time he will definitely beat him. Looking at the director, the boy assumed that this was where he needed to come, because the man had a long, beak-like nose, a skinny face and pointed ears. Without hesitation, the man began to nod his head, saying that the young man had indeed come to the right place. The good-natured director greeted the hero, addressing him as the great master, and wanted to ask a question about whether this was the same leaf-stripping technique, because he had seen it only once, and then in his youth, when that man waved his hand and used this technique, he drove away a bunch of hooligans. At that moment he was like God. Snapping his fingers, Zhao Fan said that it was precisely his teacher, and what the director said earlier, there is no doubt that this was the leaf-stripping technique. Only the elders know this technique, they test it on themselves, but it is very a rare event. For the man to meet the great master today, it was real luck, because he and the protagonist's mentor had previously been friends, which is why the director asked the young man to help in one matter that he could not cope with. Continuing to observe everything that was happening, the girl did not understand how this prestigious director of Jiangbei went so far as to bow his head and speak so respectfully, which is why it is not clear what connections this Zhao Fan has. Coming closer, the man told the hero that he was already mine to receive any reward, and he just needed to tell the number within 8 zeros, because the old man was ready to bear any expenses. The smart guy immediately exclaimed to the director that he probably knew the saying that without an early profit, he cannot afford to get up early. That is why wealth is like dirt to him. The guy is not interested in money, and he has only one request. He wants to enter Jiangbei University as a student and in this particular class, because as the director has already realized, he has rivals in love here. Having overheard the conversation, Ling Xiaoqiao could not understand why this young man decided to enter her class, and how this had anything to do with her. Meanwhile, the director of Jiangbei agreed to these conditions and asked to be given this opportunity, because from tomorrow Zhao Fan will be able to attend the university. Feeling very angry, the girl began to leave, and then shouted that she was completely confused, and she could no longer tolerate such company, which is why she began to leave. Stretching out his hand to his bag, the boy exclaimed that Xiao should wait for him. I catch up with the girl. The young man told the director that when he has some free time, they can talk about the man's problems. The director was simply stunned, because he saw a guy who doesn't care about money, but only cares about this beautiful girl, which is why he has the attitude of a real hero. Even the students saw that the director's eyes were filled with admiration. Experiencing a strong feeling of love for the lady, the hero began to catch up with him, and Huang Renqing watched everything that happened at the same time. Hooligans were extremely angry about this situation, because he saw how the hillbilly was caring for his future girlfriend. Some time later, events continue to occur in the Lin family mansion. The elderly men discussed among themselves that not far from them there is a painting of the landscape of the old city, and it took 981 days to create it. On its back there is a seal of the blessings of the gods, and if you hang it in the house, then you will be lucky and business will flourish already in less than 6 months. Lin Xiaoqiao's father, named Lin Longtu, was a major businessman in the city, and immediately decided to buy this painting, paying as much as 2 million for it. The artist who painted this picture immediately accepted the check in order to receive the money. At the same time, the elderly man only thought that rich people were incredibly stupid. Suddenly, not far away, someone began to enter the room, because the silhouette of a person could be seen through the crack in the door. As it turned out, it was Ling Xiaoqiao, and behind her was the main character, who literally asked her to wait for him. The father of the family was immediately glad that his daughter came home, but did not understand who was standing not far from her. Stretching out his hand, the young man immediately met the man and realized that he must be his future father-in-law. At that very second, the artist decided to push the guy away, because he didn't understand how a beggar like him dared to touch this gentleman's hand. Hearing this, Zhao Fan immediately became angry, because he understood that the old man was really wrong in this situation, because his clothes were also like those of a poor man. The artist began to explain that he was hired by Mr. Lin Longtu, and he has a high salary. The old man was here because the family company was in distress, and he would change this, which is why children do not belong here, and the young man needed as much as possible leave quickly. Looking at the picture, the hero could not believe that it was worth as much as 2 million, because he briefly heard their conversation and understood that this was simply impossible. The malicious old man began to grin, and exclaimed that this was really so, such a picture could not be appreciated by someone like him, which is why it was impossible to dirty the picture, and the guy was ordered to get out of here. Taking the painting in his hands, Zhao Fan noticed that this image was meaningless, there was no charm in it, and it was also painted with a very hard brush, which had no aura. Because of this, the main character decided to crumple up the painting and throw it away, because it was only good for becoming trash. The old man literally went crazy from these actions, and thought that the young man was simply mocking him, but Lin Longtu asked him to calm down. Looking at the boy, the man understood that this younger brother was saying a lot of nonsense, which is why evidence was needed, although it was obvious that he had an unusual temperament, and the owner of the house didn't even know what to do in this situation, because of what it was necessary to first listen to what he had to say. In the opinion of the protagonist, everything was really simple. The artist had previously said that the Lin family was in a desperate situation, and in order to change that, he brought this painting, but even if it is a little useful, it will only help a little, because the main problem lies in this mansion. Not understanding what was going on, the man immediately decided with interest to find out how the mansion deals with financial problems. As it turned out, before going inside the house, the heroes noticed the layout of this villa. Originally it was surrounded by feng shui and collected wealth, however, there was a huge flaw, and it cannot be seen from the outside. Hitting the wall with his foot, the boy decided to show exactly what kind of disadvantage he was talking about. The wall was broken, and behind it was a strange figurine, which was probably involved in the troubles that were happening in the family. This really surprised Lin Longtu, because he understood that he did not know about this before, and did not understand how this thing could end up behind the wall. It turned out that this carriage was facing outwards, and poor God was making money from this. Poor God would steal their entire fortune, no matter how feng shui everything was. Not knowing what to answer to this, the master of the house only continued to listen to the young man and drew conclusions. Suddenly, the bodyguard came up and told the boss that he was getting a phone call. The man also decided to tell his boss what they said on the phone. Grateful Lin Longtu exclaimed that he thanks the mister, because the business has gone uphill. One large company has agreed to their project, and the profit from it will be about 1 billion. Because the man had previously offered cooperation to this company for about 6 months. Throwing up his hands, the young man only said that he had only helped a little, and this figurine was to blame for everything. After thinking a little, Lin Longtu still didn't understand how this happened. After all, this mansion was built under strict control, and every brick and tile were controlled. The smart boy knew that Baicheng is a destroyer of feng shui. Baicheng can only be created by carpenters who studied the Luban book. Perhaps the owner of the house had previously offended some carpenter when the house was being built. Suddenly, bodyguard remembered that in the past, when they were renovating this mansion, the carpenter and his acquaintance bodyguard had an argument with each other, resulting in injury and hospitalization for several days, which is why it was likely that the carpenter was to blame for everything. Everything was very simple. You had to find that same carpenter and apologize to him, then ask him to make the god of luck, and also bring it home so that the carriage faces inside the house. Thus the god of wealth will bring good luck and profit. But still, initially, it was necessary to deal with the deceitful artist who blatantly wanted to deceive Lin Longtu. Feeling very guilty, the old man apologized to the master. They say that this Luan Fu was really wrong, and did not want to deceive him, and now he realized his mistake and asks for forgiveness, after which he decided to give the check, in the hope that now Zhao Fan will receive a sufficient reward for his action. Confused by this statement, the hero did not understand how this money could even be enough. Starting to cry, the old man apologized and said that he had an antique store on Jingjia Street, and he would pass it on to the main character, and would also follow him, learning from the young man. Thus, the main character realized that this proposal was already more worthy, and asked the old man to leave, but not to run away, because they still had to talk later. The joyful artist said goodbye to the master, and was very pleased that he was not punished. Turning to the main character, Lin Longtu was indeed very grateful. After all, if it were not for him, it was not known how many years his family would slide down and lose income. The boy also decided to thank the owner of the house for giving birth to such a beautiful child as Ling Qiao Qiao. Remembering the beginning of their conversation, the man nevertheless decided to find out whether the young man really had evidence that he was his father-in-law. Taking out a piece of paper from his pocket, the young man only exclaimed that, of course, he had evidence. The proof was a photograph of Lin Longtu's wife, which the protagonist actually took out of his pocket. This outcome of events literally made the man start crying, because he could not believe his eyes. Now he really believed Xiao Fan, and began to ask him how his father Li Tianshi was doing, to which the boy only exclaimed that everything was fine with his father, and with his grandfather too. The embarrassed girl immediately decided to ask her father why he was talking to a stranger like that. Unexpectedly, Ling Qiao began to experience severe pain and gradually lost consciousness. Her father immediately began to help her, not understanding what was happening. Nevertheless, the daughter fell to the floor and was unconscious, and the young man at that time realized that the deadly aura began to act much faster than expected. It seems that the person who sent the curse on her could not wait any longer. Some time later, events continue to occur in the best hospital in Jiangbei City. The man, worried about his daughter, decided to ask Xiao Fan what was the matter and what exactly happened to her. Soon the doctor himself came out, and the frightened father decided to ask him what happened to his daughter. The attending physician immediately said that they had done everything possible, but the girl's condition was deteriorating. Soon her heartbeat should stop. Strange black lines spread all over her body. Most likely she could die in less than half an hour. Feeling very angry, Lin Longtu could not tolerate such statements, and ordered the best doctor of this hospital to be called to save his daughter. Unfortunately, the doctor could not do anything about it, although he understood how influential the person in front of him was. But he is a real doctor, not a charlatan. If only Lin himself finds some better doctor, only then can he begin treatment. The hero began to act, and immediately began to go to the ward in order to save his beloved. Seeing that some stranger was moving into the ward, the doctor immediately ordered him not to enter the intensive care unit without permission. The young man simply said that his wife was in the office, and he was obliged to save her. Realizing that there was no other way out, the man nevertheless agreed and exclaimed that if something happened, he would take all the consequences upon himself. A few minutes later, the father and the future groom found themselves near Ling Qiao, and tried to understand what had happened to her. Some strange black lines actually began to appear on the girl's body, which did not look like a common disease. Feeling very anxious, the man only asked his daughter to hold on and not die just like that. Bowing his head, the best doctor said that he was afraid that only the gods could help this girl, and was unable to come to terms with reality and accept it. Reaching into his pocket, the main character exclaimed that there really is a god in this world. Taking out a huge magic scroll, the guy shouted that he would be God today. After the magic sweater was ready for the ritual, the young man also decided to get the magic needles. Instantly, these needles were inserted directly into the lady's head in order to perform an acupuncture procedure called the Ghostly Gate of 9 Needles. Watching everything that was happening, the doctor was really shocked, because the phantom gate opening the doors of Hades, the 9 needles cleansing fathers, this is acupuncture of the acupuncture points of life and death. This skill was really impressive, because it was believed that the ancient technique had long been lost. The determined young man exclaimed that this was indeed that very ancient technique, and right now he would use it. Thanks to such an effective technique, the man immediately saw that the black lines on his daughter's face instantly began to disappear. A qualified doctor also decided to examine the patient and initially began measuring her blood pressure. Fortunately, the pulse stabilized and the heartbeat returned to normal, so the girl was saved. Shedding a stingy man's tear, Lin Longtu decided to thank Xiao Fan, because this time he was also able to help out their family. Realizing that he could no longer restrain such feelings, the man began to hug the young man, because he understood that if it were not for this unfamiliar guy, then now his daughter would already be dead. Kneeling down, the best doctor in the hospital saw that the guy was indeed a qualified master, and he began to beg the divine doctor to accept him as a student. The hero was not going to teach anyone, and exclaimed that he had no time to bother with old people, and these 9 needles, they need to be taken out in an hour, and also not to forget to monitor the life of his dear wife. After all, Right now the main character has something to do that will be a little more important than teaching the old people. Feeling very embarrassed, the doctor began to cry, because he was sorry that this divine doctor was leaving. Some time later, events continue to happen in Ling Xiao Qiao's room. Looking into the room, the hero was really very happy, because he understood that now he would be in his girlfriend's room. Having come to his senses, the young man began to think that he was here to save his wife and should remain calm. On Ling Xiao Qiao, which takes away the life force of its bearer, this curse is very nasty, but it is against the laws of heaven, so the effect of sucking life energy is very low. To cast such a curse, you need an object that is constantly located near the wearer in order to extract vital forces from it. Therefore, such a thing must be among ordinary objects. Taking out one of the pieces of underwear, the guy did not want to be misunderstood, because he was really here to save his bride. Going through all the things that were in the closet, Zhao Fan tried to find that very enchanted thing. It turned out that this thing was an ordinary dress, which in appearance was unremarkable. There was a curled piece of hair on the dress from a witch's spell. Looking somewhere to the side, Zhao Fan exclaimed that the sorcerer had been found, and now he could see him clearly. And this was really so, because the mysterious sorcerer observed everything that was happening with the help of his mirror. This made the elderly sorcerer nervous, because he understood that this young man had found him. A determined Zhao Fan exclaimed that the sorcerer needed to prepare, because he would soon come for him. Hours later, the event continued to occur as twilight fell. The indignant young man walked down the street and thought about how he could punish the evil magician. Suddenly, not far away, many magical needles began to fly away, aiming to hit their target. Fortunately, the smart guy was easily able to catch these needles, because he realized that an attack was being prepared on him. After which, he immediately decided to throw these needles, and exclaimed that such useless tricks were insignificant against him. Thus, the magician was found, and Zhao Fan ordered him to stop hiding, because it was pointless. The elderly man was amazed that a young man at such a young age was already so developed. However, Sorcerer Bavasar believed that the main character was not an opponent of his level. Laughing at this statement, the guy gave two options to the sorcerer. The first was that he would remove the curse from Ling Xiao Qiao and leave Jiangbei, and the second was that the sorcerer would die. As it turned out, the sorcerer decided to choose a completely different option, not the one that was offered to him by the main character, namely, the option associated with the death of Zhao Fan. Not far from the sorcerer, his master's head hovered to create the most powerful magical weapon. He strangled him alive, then took his head, cleaned it and created this silver skull. It took her 3 whole years to complete it. In this connection, the sorcerer wanted Zhao Fan to experience the power of the magical silver skull for himself. For a guy, this skull seemed a little crooked, but he still knew how to show some techniques. Zhao Fan decided that he would also show a real magic weapon. Using his magical abilities, the young man began to use a brush that kills evil spirits. Practicing self-cultivation, taking a 3-inch long piece of hair every year, the protagonist twisted the name of the 1,000-year-old rosewood, then threw the essence, and bowed to the 4 beast gods. That is when the evil spirit slayer will emerge. The enraged scoundrel was looking forward to the battle, and exclaimed that there should be less words and more action. Using magic weapons, Zhao Fan used the 4 noble deities of heaven, and also summoned the eastern god, the blue dragon. Using the brush of evil spirits, an attack was used that was supposed to directly affect the enemy. 2 magical forces collided and opposed each other. The dark aura began to fight with the light one. As a result of the battle, an explosion of incredible proportions occurred, which made it impossible to see the outcome of the battle. Looking at what happened next, the sorcerer was extremely angry because he realized that he did not win with just 1 blow. Suddenly, the Bavaser completely fell, after which he admitted that the main character was really able to win. Coming closer, the young man explained that his enemy could still be saved if he lifted the curse from Ling Xiao Qiao. Feeling great fear, the Bazaar exclaimed that he no longer had the strength to resist, which is why he was going to lift the curse. At that very second, the scoundrel decided to use magic on his hand, and with the help of it he released huge claws. The enemy decided to use an unexpected blow in order to repel the arrogant young man, because he already thought that the sorcerer was so weak that he would no longer be able to fight. Because in fact, the Belazer understood that even though the enemy was stronger than him, he still had more combat experience. The main character could not tolerate this, and shouted that his enemy was stubborn, because he had just lost his last chance to save his life. Hearing this, the sorcerer only apologized, because only the young man would die in this fight, because now the blazer had an advantage that he wanted to use in battle. Having summoned a huge number of magical skulls, the scoundrel decided to do everything possible to defeat Zhao Fan. Watching his enemy, the young man saw that after he made that insidious blow, his mana increased greatly. And this was indeed the case, because the enemy, using his abilities, could summon more skulls to carry out an attack. For the guy, this attack was quite weak, he could easily parry it, after which he decided to ask his enemy if he was really going to fight to the death. As it turned out, the skulls were behind the main character, and they were already close enough to explode and cause serious damage. The smart guy nevertheless jumped away from the place where the explosion occurred and realized that now he could fight the villain on equal terms. The sorcerer, seeing this, only began to laugh, because even if the guy runs to the ends of the earth, his silver skulls will pursue him until he dies. Zhao Fan couldn't believe these words, and yet decided to ask his enemy if this was really true. The brave warrior continued to fight, and before striking, he shouted that he was very sorry, but it was too early to die. The criminal could not have expected that he would now be attacked again. Continuing to smile, the young man only understood that now he could really win. Thus, the blow was dealt directly to the sorcerer, which forced him to freeze in place and await the consequences of such a serious magical technique. Turning to his enemy, the hero exclaimed that it seemed that his skulls had returned to him again. And this was really so, because the enemy continued to stand silently, because he could no longer fight. Having taken the blow, the insolent fell to the ground, because now his body was completely damaged, and the battle was over. With the last of his strength, the enemy decided to ask who this guy was, because he was interested in whose hand he had fallen. Turning to the scoundrel, the young man exclaimed that he would never tell him, because he was not worthy of it. A few minutes later, the hero decided to enter the sorcerer's house to see where he was hiding. Supposedly, in this house he cast a bloody curse. It was strange that it was not for Ling Xiaoqiao. Moving further into the house, Zhao Fan began to realize that it seemed that the sorcerer had cast a curse on someone else. There was a girl lying in a bed nearby, and perhaps she had already been here for a long time. Her spirit should have left her body within the first month, but it was forced to remain in the world of the living. While looking around the room, the young man discovered a portrait of the sorcerer and this girl. Thus, he realized that they were father and daughter, in which case, it is not surprising that he fought so desperately because he wanted to forcibly resume his daughter's life by taking away the life energy from Ling Xiaoqiao, but it is against the law in heaven, so it would be very difficult to do. Touching the magical objects, the main character apologized to the girl, because she should have died a long time ago, and now he was going to take away what belonged to Ling Xiaoqiao. The life energy from the body of the girl who was lying on the bed completely evaporated, and now she looked like a mummy. Sighing with relief, Zhao Fan still had some strange feeling, and it did not give him peace of mind. Some time later, events continued to occur in a field outside the city. The guy nevertheless decided to bury the bodies of the deceased, and apologized to them because he did not know their names. But on the way to another world they would not be alone, because they were buried nearby, and this meant that they would go to heaven or hell together. A few hours later, Zhao Fan returned to the hospital to visit Ling Xiaoqiao. Raising his hand upward, the young man began to use a magical technique in order to summon a sacred artifact. The sacred artifact was also set on fire in order to use it later. Thanks to the artifact, it was possible to restore Ling Xiaoqiao's strength, which is why the hero began to act and brought the artifact directly to the girl's face. Thus, vital energy was successfully returned, and the lady could move on with her life calmly. Watching this unusual procedure, the man was impressed by his son-in-law's skills and did not expect him to be capable of such things. The sacred ritual was successfully carried out, and the young man waved his feather, which meant the end of the return of vital energy. The ritual really worked, because immediately after finishing, Ling Xiaoqiao was able to open her eyes, and she felt better every second. Out of happiness, the caring father immediately began to cry, because he did not believe that his daughter was now really in perfect order. It was a pleasant sight to see, and the young man really did everything possible to save his beloved. After some time, events continued to occur in Ling Xiaoqiao's family home. The young man brought a bag with him and dug into it to find certain ingredients for the dish he was going to cook. The first ingredient for preparing the dish was ginseng root, which was supposed to have a beneficial effect on the immune system of the future wife. The next ingredient for the dish was a large lacquered trudovik, which could add spiritual strength to the person who eats it. All ingredients were placed in an alchemical cauldron, then the lid was tightly closed so that each of the elements was thoroughly boiled. Watching her future husband cook, Ling Xiaoqiao was simply shocked, because she didn't understand how someone could not know about the existence of a multi-cooker. The cooking ritual began again, and the young man exclaimed, calling on the spirits of heaven and earth to help them avoid mistakes during the ritual. Suddenly, the multi-cooker made a sound, which meant that the dish was already cooked. An unsurpassed vital energy pill has been prepared. Taking one for a week can not only restore lost energy, but also strengthen the spirit and physical condition, after which it will be difficult to get sick. The girl couldn't believe it, and decided to try this unusual dish herself to see if it was really so. What happened next really surprised her, because the pill simply melted in her mouth and left a very pleasant feeling. Seeing his beloved's reaction, the young man was very flattered to see how much she liked the dish, but still he decided to ask if it was really tasty. This question made Ling Xiaoqiao very angry, and she almost wanted to hit her future groom, asking him not to be such a goofball. However, the lady also understood that she still needed to thank her savior. Holding him close, the girl thanked Zhao Fan, because he really saved her life. Some time later, events continued to occur at Jiangbei University. The awkward young man laughed and blushed deeply, as if something was very embarrassing to him. As it turned out, the guy was embarrassed only because the girl took his hand, and Ling Xiaoqiao felt very stupid because everyone was looking at them, and she was almost dying of shame. The girls from other classes were very surprised, because some hillbilly could be with Ling Xiaoqiao, but they still understood that this guy was approved by the director himself, and this young man was able to conquer such a goddess on his own. Even the director himself was shocked, but was glad to see the young man, because he needed help, which he had been waiting for quite a long time. A little embarrassed, Ling Xiaoqiao greeted the director, and the main character exclaimed that the gentleman must keep his word, which is why he was going to go with the director so that he could tell him what exactly needed help. After all, Zhao Fan was not here to study, and asked his lover to give him the opportunity to copy her homework after class. A few minutes later, the director was telling Mr. Zhao Fan that this mansion was his good friend General Tang Yixiong. He is already old, but his health is fine, which is why the hero was warned that this man can sometimes be very strict. But recently, the director of Jiangbei felt that he was clearly starting to go crazy and his health was no longer as good as before, which is why Zhao Fan was asked to examine the general. Pointing his finger at one of the parts of the structures, the director exclaimed that this place was indeed very strange. It seems to be a set of women's clothing, nothing surprising, but the general has lived alone for a very long time, and the director asked him about it earlier, but he did not answer because his mind is not right. Looking at the balcony, the young man thought that it was very easy to determine whether it was a demon or a deity. Nevertheless, they decided to come to the general so that the hero could examine him, and the director of Jiangbei was proud that he had such a smart student, and did not miss the opportunity to praise him in front of the general. The smart guy really decided to immediately use his abilities to understand the problem of his interlocutor. Touching the general's hand, he clearly felt a loss of strength and energy, which made it obvious that there was a ghost in the house. Looking around the man's house, Zhao Fan immediately discovered that he was interested in drawing and calligraphy, which is why he asked to look around here. The elderly man agreed without any problem and invited his guests to go inside the other rooms. Meanwhile, the hero did not miss a second, and continuing to use his superpowers, he examined every corner of the building. Looking at one of the paintings, the young man had a very strange feeling. Because this painting depicted the ancient spirit of the artist Luo Wuxin, it is rumored that this spirit resides in paintings that are especially lifelike, a spirit known throughout the world as the picture fairy. The picture fairy very easily captures the soul of a living person, lures him captive, and then captures his body. Judging by the situation, the general has less than a year left, and then the spirit will capture Tang Yixin's body and replace it. Addressing the director, the young man asked him to hold the general in order to perform one magic trick. The alarmed man immediately began to run to his painting, because he saw that they wanted to do something with it, but the director of Jiangbei tried with all his might to stop him. Zhao Fan continued to look at the painting and thought about the fact that people and demons always have the same procedure. After all, every time you need to use your superpowers to drive out evil spirits. Having applied supernatural powers to the painting, the young man sprinkled a magical red elixir on it, with the help of which the demon was supposed to manifest himself. And this was really so, because the evil spirit began to squeak with all his might, experiencing severe pain. Without hesitation, the main character touched the forehead of the painting, and shouted to the evil spirit that he needed to disappear now. Continuing to use his magical abilities, Zhao Fan began to summon ghosts and demons in order to expel them from the painting, and then from this building altogether. Thanks to his skill, the young man easily managed to expel the demon from the picture, and he was embodied in a girl who fell to the floor. Lao Tang immediately began to shout that Suyu should not dare touch him, and left her behind. The worried general could not understand what Zhao Fan was trying to achieve and why he was hurting this girl. Feeling very angry towards the ghosts, the young man said that this was not true, because in fact, he knew that this ghost was too weak, and there was another ghost in this room. After thinking a little, Zhao Fan decided to threaten the ghost with his magical power, and asked him where the second evil spirit was. Starting to cry, the evil spirit did his best not to say where his partner was. Realizing that it was becoming even more difficult, the guy began to use his magical artifact to threaten the demon so that he would tell the truth. Using both hands, the hero held a brush in one hand, which was a magical artifact, and with the other hand he used mana to draw a magical diagram. Thanks to the magical artifact, it was possible to use the young man's skill and knowledge to find out where the second demon was. A few minutes later, the magical symbols for the ceremony were drawn directly on the floor of the room. Having gathered all his strength to carry out the ritual, the young man began to act and crossed his hands together. A magical flame began to emerge from the protagonist's mouth, with the help of which he had to track the source of power. The unusual flames immediately began to be consumed by the seals that were drawn on the floor. Thus, thanks to the skills and knowledge of magic, it was possible not only to apply the ancient ritual, but also to find out where the demon was. Turning around, Zhao Fan immediately exclaimed that he had found the very demon who had been hiding so carefully. And this was really so, because the demon was hiding in clothes that were on the balcony. Gradually, the spirit began to transform into a certain female form, which even looked like a real person. This spirit must make 3 transfigurations and no one should interfere with this important moment. Also, the found spirit emitted an incredibly strange aroma that really could not be confused with anything. This spirit was a soul absorber, a ghost of the highest level. One day, a young woman was captured by a ghost. He mutilated her innocent body and expelled the soul from her. He then placed her body in a bath of incense to add freshness to her body and kept her there for 80 or 90 days, after which she turned into a demon who is a soul absorber. Her flesh, bones and soul exude a fragrance that deceives people. The soul devourer transforms once every 10 years, twice when she turns 100 years old and 3 times in her 1000 years. Each time after the transformation her smell becomes more intense and her power becomes greater. Feeling anxious, the young man recalled that Fong Cai had previously told him that he was going to make 3 transformations, which means she has existed for 1000 years. But still, the hero understood that he could defeat even such a strong demon. The spirit absorber was very angry at the nasty people, and wanted to kill absolutely everyone in this room, because they interfered with his transformation. The general did not understand what was happening in his house, because he was fascinated by evil spirits who wanted to harm his health. Using the man as a human shield, Zhao Fan began to stand behind him, and asked the general to hold on, because he had to withstand the attack of the evil spirit. The hand of the evil spirit was almost there, and in a few seconds it was supposed to attack the general to take his soul. The malice on the part of the evil spirit was visible to the naked eye, and at first glance, the ordinary girl had incredibly evil eyes. For the general himself, this was truly a great stress, and he asked the great master not to do this again. As it turned out, this was only part of the plan, because the hero understood that the soul absorber for the 3rd transformation needed a fresh, still pulsating heart of a person born in the year of Yang, the month of Yang, the day of Yang, and the time of Yang, and she was planning a trick here, ordering the ghost Suyu to seduce Mr. Tang. In fact, the evil spirit was seeking precisely nothing other than the heart of the 4 Yangs. Gradually, the girl began to transform again, and did not understand how the young man found out everything. The self-confident protagonist saw that the evil spirit became scared when he started talking like that, and the demon would still learn what real despair is. After all, Zhao Fan possessed not only dexterity and skill, but also a magical artifact, with the help of which it was possible to destroy any demon. The devourer was again simply furious, and shouted with all his might that he would grind every little person here into powder. Suddenly, the demon began to attack, and first of all he chose the strongest target in order to destroy it. After the attack, an explosion of incredible proportions occurred, and it was unclear whether the young man could survive. Fortunately, the smart guy was able to survive and dodged the incredibly devastating attack of the evil spirit. Seeing this, the spirit absorber was about to attack again in order to destroy his target. The attack was really strong, and the main character understood that it would be difficult for him to resist for a long time. Soon, magical abilities began to gradually overcome the young man, and the spirit gradually shackled his hands so that he could not move. In fact, Zhao Fan began to feel embarrassed by such a reception, because he had an inexplicable feeling of excitement, which is why he realized that the evil spirit really has a delicious taste. The lady with the evil spirit inside told her enemy to shut up because she thought he was a little devil. As it turned out, the young man gave in on purpose in order to test how strong the evil demon was. Having used his magical artifact, Zhao Fan began to wait for its action, and did everything possible to destroy the strongest enemy in this room. Initially, due to the fact that the guy's hands were tied, he grabbed the magical artifact with his teeth. And with the help of his teeth, the guy managed to use an artifact in the form of a feather and create an unusual magical wall that could even attack. The magic wall was easily able to hit the body of the demon, who so brazenly attacked the defenseless young man. The self-confident guy was truly incredibly happy that he was able to defeat such a strong opponent with only his mouth and skill. Trembling in pain, the demon literally hated his opponent, and only wished him death. As it turned out, the demonic creature not only possesses magic, but also physical weapons, which it decided to summon. The physical weapon in the demon's hands turned out to be two extremely sharp blades, with which the spirit was going to attack. For the guy, this was an amazing turn of events, because he couldn't believe that his rival wanted to fight with knives, because for women this type of weapon is really atypical. Still, the evil spirit was ready to fight, and having grabbed both blades, the battle was about to begin. The first red silk sword flew past, and Zhao Fan was truly surprised that this sword was so beautiful. Red silk was tied to the blade for a reason, because with its help it was possible to control the weapon from a long distance. By pulling the red silk it was possible to make the sword move in the opposite direction, which greatly surprised the young man. At first he wanted to see the trajectory of the daggers, and then he was going to attack in close combat, because now the main thing for him was not to be afraid of anything. The enemy turned out to be not as weak as it seemed at first glance, and Zhao Fan watched how his opponent fought. Using his trick, the young man could easily dodge several blades that flew straight towards him. The flexible and super strong guy even knelt down for the lady in order to evade her weapon. This style of fighting was strange even for a demon, because it was the first time the creature had seen such a strange opponent. Feeling strong anger towards the spirit, the young man continued to attack, because he could not give up just like that. Unfortunately, the attack was missed because the creature was able to easily dodge such a ridiculous blow. Immediately after this, a counterattack arose, and the main character was hit directly in the head with a deft kick. After such a strong blow, the guy needed to rest a little, but it was obvious that the enemy would not wait. The furious demon continued his attack, and used magical weapons straight from his hands, firing them directly at the main character. The frightened guy immediately could not understand what to do in this situation, because he was literally in a trap, into which he himself had fallen. The feather had supernatural power, and with its help it was possible to repel the attack of even such super sharp blades that the opponent wielded. Concentrating his magical energy, the demon began to use his hand to launch multiple attacks directly at the protagonist. The creature began to spin at an incredible speed, which made it impossible to dodge such serious blows, which were explored one by one. Realizing that this ghost was more brutal than expected, Zhao Fan gradually began to retreat, because such blows really could not be blocked. Still, it was not in vain that the young master studied magic, and skillfully began to use it to sharpen his gaze. With the help of supernatural vision, it was possible to see one's opponent even when he was moving at such incredible speed. Zhao Fan was easily able to catch his opponent, because thanks to his skills he was able to see the scoundrel during the attack. The demon could not expect this, and did not understand how an ordinary person could witness such fast attacks. The guy was not at a loss again, and used the chance to attack the impudent creature. I understand that the person is still weak. The demon did everything possible to win this battle and used any trick that would give an advantage. As it turned out, while Zhao Fan was making a counterattack, he accidentally tore off the girl's clothes. Rising from the floor, the young man began to think what had happened, because now he had the demon's robe in his hands. The embarrassed girl sat on the floor and exclaimed that her opponent was indeed a bully. At the same time, when the demon weakened, the main character began to use a magical seal so that the evil spirit would not harm anyone again. The creature was truly amazed that it lived for more than 1,000 years and was defeated by some boy. In fact, this was not just any boy. The main character was a supreme heavenly master who contained the light of all of China for 5,000 years, and this could not be enough to make any demon shake. Suddenly, the young man had a strange feeling, and he gradually began to be enchanted by the incredibly good aroma from the girl. Still, the hero understood that this was the demon spell, which he should not succumb to, because he was the supreme heavenly master, and he could not be seduced by such a beauty. By chance, the demon continued his attack, and exclaimed that the time had come to end this battle. The main character was also ready to continue the battle, and understood that the battle really should be over. Using the magical light from his brush, Zhao Fan drew a diagram with which it was possible to defeat the evil spirit. I understand that the opponent is really strong. The evil spirit began to say that if she, the princess, frees herself, she will never spare a person like him. To the guy, this evil spirit was just an ordinary scoundrel who was just trying to pretend to be a princess so that he would be pitied. But the girl did not like this, and she shouted that she should be more respectful, because she was the 17th princess of the Xia kingdom. Hearing this, the young man decided to think before killing the evil demon. Using his artifact, the hero thought about what he had not felt on her body from the breath of death, and perhaps the princess was really alive. Confused, the girl began to say that she was killed, but existed in the form of a ghost. For a long time, only during the second death 900 years ago, the heart of a dying person was taken to continue her life, and she suffered so much, but now she is no one can't even regret it. After listening to the princess, Zhao Fan began to doubt her words, and asked to explain the situation with the general and the spirit from the painting named Sui Yu. As it turned out, when the evil spirit noticed Tang Yixin, Sui Yu was already here, but little Yu did not want the general to remain in the house alone, and even I know that the demon wants to take his heart. She begged her to seal his soul in the picture together with her. Sighing heavily, the former princess admitted that little Yu is very affectionate and pleasant, so she decided to accept her as her servant. They really love each other along with the general, and Tang Yixiong's soul is leaving not because of the two of them, but by his own desire. After listening to the spirit, the hero understood that there was no imprint of death on their souls, so it was clear that these two spirits were not bad at all. However, the young man still wanted to communicate with the demon, because he had always dreamed of meeting such a girl. It is rare to meet a ghost who does not look too old. Moreover, he could find another heart for her to complete all three transformations. For the ghost, this was a shocking statement, because she did not think that she could be some guy's personal maid on call, because she had adhered to chastity for 1,000 years, which was more important than survival. Zhao Fan nevertheless decided to explain that he did not need the ghost to warm his bed, and he was going to leave it alone. It was only necessary out of pure motives. The smart young man also noticed that in the body of the ghost there is something similar to a pea, called the bead of the pure soul, and, in which all its life force is imprisoned. It can not only store the power of the ghost, but also particles of the sun and moon. Pure Yin soul beads are needed for the source of yang contained in the demon's body, in one place, and in the center of the beads, the essence of the sun is very dense, which supports its immortality. A little embarrassed, the guy explained that they really fit each other perfectly, just like yin and yang. Getting even more angry, the ghost girl began to be indignant, saying that she was not going to stay here in the ordinary world with this strange guy. Unfortunately, the lady still had no other place, so since the main character needed her, she would probably be reluctant to stay with him. After listening to the ghost, the young man began to understand that she was dead and arrogant, and he no longer knew who he had found, a ghost assistant or a mistress. However, Zhao Fan still had two unresolved matters that needed to be dealt with. The alarmed general began to beg the guy to help him, because he really wanted to be with his ghost girlfriend. Watching the lovers do this, the main character agreed, because he understood that people do not choose who to fall in love with. Taking out a strange pouch, he began to talk about how they have different paths. Even if Suyu does not continue to deplete his yang, his soul will still flow away, which is why Zhao Fan decided to give his homemade pills, and asked the general to take them to save their lives. Thus, they could remain with each other again, like a person and a ghost, but if Suyu hurt someone again, then the main character would come to this house again and end it. Feeling intense gratitude, the man and his girlfriend immediately bowed down to the young man and thanked him. The main character himself decided to take another ghost with him in order to communicate with her a little later. Some time later, the ghost girl changed into earthly clothes, and was very embarrassed, because these clothes made her feel ashamed. Suddenly, Ling Xiaoqiao saw a strange woman and didn't understand who she was. The cry from the future wife was heard throughout the house, because she asked Zhao Fan what kind of woman was in their house. The girl was really very angry, and was literally ready to kill her future groom so that he would answer her question. Smiling at his future wife, the young man said that today he visited the old director to exorcise the ghost. This girl is that same terrible ghost, but there is no need to worry, because she will just be their maid. The ghost girl also did not like this outcome of events, and she began to reproach the guy for using her only to clean the house, although she is a princess. All this time the guy understood that it doesn't matter what power he has, because he's still afraid of women. The following events continued to occur 3 days after the incident at the house. The elderly man welcomed everyone to the auction of the master's collection. The treasures in this auction are absolutely unique, and everyone could purchase this work of art. Also on sale at this auction was a jade pendant with a 1,000-year history, in which many secrets were hidden. It not only protects from demons, but also prolongs life. While attending the auction, the young man was thinking that after receiving Lu Wanfu's store, making some money seemed like a good idea, but Ling Xiaoqiao exclaimed that her future husband himself asked her father to spread the news about this auction. Today she sees that the result really good because there are a lot of influential people here. Although these people were no different from ordinary people, there were still some individuals who were impressive in their influence. For example, there were 2 martial artists standing nearby, and they didn't look special at all. The masters immediately began to discuss among themselves that Zhao Fan had a weapon called Bing Pei, that very unique, magical weapon. It could help him improve himself, control his mind and soul, so he would definitely reach the level of innate essence. Martial arts have been in their world since the very beginning of its existence, and they must train as much as possible. After 3 trials, 90% of the fighters are from the heart, due to the limited talents, but it is possible to achieve the innate essence, although not everyone is worthy of it. Laughing, the young man exclaimed that since this amulet was really so useful, they needed to find a way to buy more of them for their family. After a few minutes, the main character still became quite bored, and he decided to leave this place. As it turned out, all this time someone was watching Zhao Fan through an optical sight. The secretive sniper was watching the young man, and at the same time was on the roof, which is why no one could even notice him. Without hesitation, the sniper fired a shot in order to hit Zhao Fan directly and eliminate him. Fortunately, the guy dodged in time, and thus the shot deviated from its target. For a sniper, this was truly an amazing phenomenon, and he understood that his target's luck was truly at a high level. Continuing to watch the young man, Sniper discovered that he had entered a store with 2 girls. The Golden Killer, nicknamed Invincible, understood that this guy was destined to live for a couple more hours, and then he was going to send him to another, better world. A few hours later, events continued to occur on a dark street, where the main character was walking along with 2 companions. The insidious villain took out his blade and decided to make a stealthy attack, expecting that the target would not notice him and would be eliminated. The villain still managed to make a blow, and thus the main character was defeated, because the blade was used to hit him in the head. Concerned, Ling Xiaoqiao did not understand what to do in this situation, and only watched as her future groom died. The Golden Killer was able to grab the future bride, because the weak girls could not resist such a strong opponent. Thus, the villain understood that the man was dead and the women were now under his control. Some time later, events continued to occur in the suburbs, namely in the private residence of Huang Zhenxing. The family led by Hu Xiao discussed that they had hired the best killer, namely the Golden One. He had just written that the problem had been solved, and Ling Qiaoqiao would soon be in the hands of the family leader, because of which the entire business of the Huang family would be seized. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard nearby, as if someone was approaching the house. And this was indeed the case, because one of the servants noted that the goods had probably already arrived. Both of the servants went outside and decided to greet the invincible warrior who was able to fulfill the order. The man immediately exclaimed that he really was a golden killer, and was able to fulfill this order. Unexpectedly, one of the men noticed that something was wrong with the behavior of the golden killer. This man was also very strange in appearance, which made it unclear whether this was really the same hired killer. Coming closer, the services discovered that it was not a golden killer, but just a fake. The main character standing nearby explained that an ordinary killer could not do anything to him, because he created an illusion of 3 rag dolls, and he fell for it. Trembling with fear, the scoundrels could not believe these words, because they did not understand how it was possible to kill such an experienced killer. The insolent leader of the family immediately ordered his servants to deal with the scoundrels who dared to come to this house. And he ordered the girl who was nearby to be left to him. I hope that he can do whatever he wants with her. Unexpectedly, a seemingly ordinary girl was able to lift a stone with the power of her thoughts, controlling it with the help of her magical abilities. The elderly man could not believe his eyes, because he could not imagine that in front of him would be a girl who was a martial arts master. With the help of magical abilities, a thrown stone flew right near the elderly man. But unfortunately, a stone flying at incredible speed hit one of the servants, causing him to experience incredible pain. The worried young man literally began to beg to be spared, because he saw how strong his opponent was. The main character was not going to do this, because his opponent sentenced himself to death by finding the killer. Even more unforgivable is the fact that he dared to encroach on the life of his future wife. Because of this, the scoundrel received the worst possible outcome of events, namely, death. Looking at these 2 scoundrels, the ghost girl immediately decided to ask what to do with them. Wiping his hands after a short fight, Zhao Fan began to talk about how these enemies should not be allowed to leave. Also, if there are 2 more uninvited guests nearby, they also need to be pacified. In fact, these people were present at the fair, and they really wanted to get the magical artifacts that the main character had. The young man did not understand how this was possible. After all, he left his future wife in the car so that she would not see all this carnage, and no one could even think that there would be anyone else here. Coming closer, the scoundrel said that now Zhao Fan knows their family for sure, because he has Bing Pei in his hand, and if he guesses what power it gives him, then he will probably leave Ling Qiaoqiao alive. But if he doesn't guess, then you will have to say goodbye to your beloved. These conditions literally forced the young man to experience incredible anger, and of course he apologized, but her opponents were already dead, and the dead cannot dictate the rules. This answer amazed the uninvited guest, because he considered his opponent a daredevil, since he was being decided to say so, because his name was Xiao Ju, the lord of the Luan family, and this Bing Pei helps him improve, makes it possible to pass into the narrowest places, and today he was going to involve him in the case. Getting ready to attack, the villain began to approach the hero with incredible speed and swung his arm. The brave guy continued to stand in one place, and only at the last moment dodged in order not to fall under such a strong blow. Watching everything happen, the man thought that with the help of Ding Pei, Shu Ju almost reached the innate essence, but also that little boy managed to evade the power of his master, which meant that the enemy was also quite strong. Still, the elderly servant was not going to let his master die, and shouted that he was coming to the rescue. Now the 2 opponents were about to attack Zhao Fan, but he continued to evade and did not counterattack in order to assess the strength of his opponents. Nevertheless, the young man decided to use magical techniques and began to use his superpowers in practice. Using one of the strongest blows, Zhao Fan was easily able to hit 2 opponents at once, which is why they began to experience unbearable pain. From the first blow, the elderly man could not continue the battle, and lay not far from the broken tree. Realizing his power, the young man only thought that it seems that the Luan family is not so majestic, because the opponents in it are quite weak. Not realizing what happened, the old man began to deny the strength of the main character, because on the path of learning martial arts, he had not encountered anything like this, because the strength within the enemy is a sign of a martial arts master. In fact, the strength of the main character was not equal to the strength of the masters. After all, he had one difference: he did not create the force, he was the force, because he is a heavenly master. Such a weak opponent was unworthy to live in this world, which is why Zhao Fan decided to save him from torment. After winning the battle, the guy began to understand that one of the 4 great families of martial arts, the Lin clan, for their own benefit, kept the beauties and tried to threaten him. They are still those bastards, and the heavenly master today, for the sake of people, ascended to heaven and brought order there. Looking around, the boy also saw that there were 2 more opponents nearby, and he immediately began to think about what to do with them. The elderly man held his relative in his arms and begged the young master to let them go, because they were never going to cause him trouble again. Fortunately, Zhao Fan was still kind to them and let them go because they had already received their punishment. Meanwhile, Ling Qiaoqiao gradually began to come to her senses, and immediately saw her future groom in front of her. The caring young man held his wife in his arms and asked her not to be afraid, because he was here, and all the troubles were already behind. A little embarrassed, the girl still decided to kiss her savior, because she was very grateful to him. The lifeless old man was lying not far from the broken tree all this time, when suddenly an unusual butterfly began to fly up to him. Meanwhile, events continued to occur on the outskirts of the imperial capital, namely in the Luan family estate. An unknown man was meditating in a magic room, and was surrounded by many candles, because he wanted to increase his level of skill. Suddenly, the old man opened his eyes, because he realized that he had finally achieved his goal, and rose to the realm of the master. Once his dear grandson Xiao Er returned, including Chief Elder Tai Shang and Lao San, his family would already have as many as 4 martial artists. After which, as soon as the words about relatives were spoken, the candles immediately went out. The experienced master instantly realized that something was wrong with his relatives, because the candles could not just go out. Feeling a strong rage, the old man shouted that his relatives should have gone to Jiangbei and bought Ban Pei, but somehow their fire of life went out, which made the master immediately realize that someone had dared to kill his family members. At that same second, an unusual magical butterfly flew in, which meant that a message had occurred. This shocked the elderly man, but he understood that in this way he could find out what exactly happened to his relatives. The unusual butterfly gradually began to turn into a kind of hologram, from which it was possible to read the message. As it turned out, Zhao Fan was present in this hologram, who was captured after his victory. Thus, the man realized that Zhao Fan dared to kill his grandson, and after this old man entered the master realm, after a month the condition became stable, and he could now fight the young master. A few days later, Zhao Fan was invited by Su Chunyin to one of the most revered families of Jiangbei, the Chen family, to examine their sick daughter. A young daughter named Chen Chun-er was the young mistress of the Chen clan, and the daughter of Su Chunyin. Looking at the girl, the young man immediately began to measure her pulse in order to understand what happened to her. Silently, the main character continued to observe his patient in order to understand her true diagnosis. The alarmed man turned to the master, because he had to help his dear daughter, because the old man had been practicing medicine for many years, but he could not help. Suddenly, as soon as the protagonist decided to extend his hands to examine the patient, he was immediately ordered to remove his hands. As it turned out, it was the young master of the Chen family, because he understood that his father was helpless here, and in this case, it was unclear what such a waste like Zhao Fan could do. The father of the family was angered by these words from his youngest son, and he ordered him to stop being rude to the guest. The main character also understood that being the young owner of a large family, it can be difficult to train in martial arts, but this guy was quite good. However, he would still disappoint him, because he did not come here for the sake of deception, because he wants to help a sick person. The young man could not believe these words, and again assumed that their guest Zhao Fan, who calls himself a doctor, is in fact a liar who will not help his sister in any way. Realizing that there was no other way to show his power, Zhao began to act and used part of his power. Thus, a magical barrier was created, due to which the youngest son of the family could not interfere with the examination of the sick girl. Seeing this, the young man realized that this force looked invisible outwardly, but it stopped him like a wall. Looking at the guy, Zhao Fan said that while the celestial master is saving people, outsiders are doing nothing but hindering. If the younger one wants a quick death, then he can continue in the same spirit. Realizing his helplessness, the youngest son of the family agreed with the master and did not argue with him anymore. The main character began to act, and used the fiery energy of the dragon to conduct further inspection. Now it was necessary to introduce yang energy in order to examine the state of the girl's body. As soon as the yang energy was introduced into the lady's body, the young man was immediately amazed at the outcome of such an examination. After all, with the help of a fairly simple technique, it was possible to reveal that the girl literally contains the spirit of a giant evil snake that is capable of killing anyone who touches it. This meant that there was dark energy in the young lady's body, which caused her to suffer from such a serious illness. Each of the relatives could not even imagine that the eldest daughter of the family was suffering from such a serious illness. The determined protagonist took action and began to take something out of his pocket. As it turned out, these were magic seals, with the help of which Zhao Fan wanted to finish off the demon right on the spot. The magic seals immediately began to affect the demonic snake, but it didn't seem to care at all. The evil creature continued to look literally into the eyes of the main character, and did not want to die in order to harm as many people as possible. A few hours later, the family decided to drink tea and discuss the problem that the eldest daughter was currently experiencing. The worried young man decided to find out from the master what kind of disease had struck his younger sister, in other words, what kind of evil was poisoning her, and how the demonic snake ended up in her. In fact, the guy had a question for his youngest son, because he wanted to understand whether they really never provoked snakes in childhood. Initially, the young man was surprised, because he did not understand how ordinary snakes were involved, but then he remembered that in childhood their family went on a trip, then his sister accidentally stepped on a small snake, and it bit her. At that moment he became very angry and killed this snake. Realizing what had happened, the main character exclaimed that this was certainly enough. At that moment the children were killed by the demonic snake, and he responded by casting a snake curse so that Chun-Er would die in her best years. The young man immediately began to panic and literally begged the master to help his sister. It was known that only by killing the demonic snake can one get rid of the curse, but judging by the giant spiritual snake that settled in Chun-Er's body, it may have reached the level of the dragon realm, and its strength is far greater than Zhao Fan's. This meant that their family and the master were not that close, so the master had no reason to risk his life for them. But that was not the point. Zhao Fan realized that he had no desire to help them, but there was no other way out now, because inside he wanted to help with all his might, but his strength would not be enough. After drinking the tea, the young man felt an unusual effect from the strange drink, as if it had an ancient origin. And it was really like that. The servant said that this is De Hong Pao tea. His father carefully preserves it and serves it only to the most dear and honored guests. The hero also realized that this was indeed true, because this tea could rarely be found, because it is very useful for increasing strength. Thanks to this tea the effect of training will increase, then you can undoubtedly defeat the demonic snake. Fortunately, the owners of the house had 2 or 3 more packages of this tea, and they could immediately give them to the young man. In the future, as soon as more tea appears, they will immediately inform him, and when the guy's strength increases, he can help his little sister. Thus, the agreement was successfully concluded, and Zhao Fan was supposed to come to this house again in the future as soon as he became stronger and help the girl. Some time later, the main character returned home and literally fell from powerlessness. Entering the house, the director of Jiangbei approached the guy and wanted to tell him something. As it turned out, the director introduced his follower, whose name is Quan Xiao. He wants to ask the young men for help in solving a problem. Starting to cry, the seemingly brutal man said that due to the fact that the master's skills were incredibly high, he was obliged to help his daughter. The next day, events continued to occur at Xian Xiao's estate. There was a young girl lying in the bed who looked quite strange, because her eyes were black and she was completely lifeless. Even the main character was struck by the girl's appearance, and he immediately could not understand what had happened to her. Still, Zhao Fan decided to touch the sick lady in order to find out her true diagnosis. After the initial examination, the young man immediately turned to the girl's father to ask if she had been poisoned by something. And this was really so, because yesterday the servant and the girl went for a walk and picked a couple of mushrooms, but they did not have time to return and cook them, and the lady was mischievous in herself, so she secretly ate one mushroom. Suddenly, Zhao Fan realized that earlier they had found a grave mushroom in the forest, and yesterday, in addition to collecting mushrooms, he wanted to know if the sick girl had encountered anything else. Trembling with fear, the servant began to tell that when they were collecting mushrooms, then the girl accidentally stepped on one of the dug coffins, and did not know whether this information was important. Decided to act, the main character gave the mushroom to the ghost girl, and asked her to fly around the area and see if there was an evil spirit on the outskirts of the city. To complete the mission, the ghost girl immediately began to go to the window in order to fly. Possessing magical abilities, the lady could easily fly above the ground and head to complete the task. For ordinary people, this was truly an amazing ability, because they did not understand how this was even possible. A little embarrassed, the young man explained that they should not panic, because for them flying is an ordinary thing. After the ghost girl was sent on a mission, the young man and the sick girl's father began to wait. Some time later, the ghost arrived after completing the task, and said that she had found the necessary creature. It turned out to be a sleepy ghost, being locked in a certain place. Mayer accidentally stepped on his coffin yesterday. Subsequently he decided to take revenge on her. The found ghost also said that he would remove the damage from her if they helped him return a pair of red agate tigers. The girl's father immediately understood what was going on, because he knew where the red agate tigers were. Instantly the concerned man took out his phone and exclaimed that it seemed like he had already heard about these tigers. Tomorrow evening there will be an auction in the city. Among other goods there will be these tigers. Snatching the phone from the man, the protagonist immediately noticed that these tigers really looked impressive, and he would lend himself one to decorate his home. The boy also decided to see what else was being sold at this auction, because there were a lot of interesting goods there. After a few minutes of searching, Zhao Fan was still able to find something that he really liked from the goods. Immediately, he began to look at the ghost girl and laugh, because this product was probably intended for her. The girl clearly did not like this outcome of events, and she immediately wanted to find out from the young man what he was up to. Some time later, events continued to occur in the afternoon, before the auction. Looking around, the ghost girl was amazed that this restaurant had good wine and snacks, which is why she wanted to know who all this was intended for. The smart guy just exclaimed that all this was intended only for one Buddhist monk. This monk turned out to be Shenxiu, a monk who loves alcohol and meat. One day he and Zhao Fan faced a common problem, and eventually became bosom friends. The main character was very happy to see his old comrade, and was amazed that he was safe and sound. Looking at the ghost girl, the Buddhist monk was amazed, because brother Zhao Fan was so strong that he was able to accept a lost heart, and he admired him. No matter how you look, this girl was at the peak of the second stage, a little more and she will reach the third stage. Feeling proud of his action, the young man noticed that his comrade really had impressive attentiveness, but this time he came to ask him for one favor. Seeing the snacks on the table, the monk immediately asked to give up this politeness. It was obvious to the young man that he wanted something, because every time there were many different dishes and alcohol. Indignant at this reaction, Zhao Fan asked his friend whether he had learned the 10 commandments from Buddhism, namely, the third from the list. But at that moment the monk was no longer particularly interested in this, because he put his feet up on the dining table and decided to eat well. Laughing, the man exclaimed that he could tell these commandments, but only if Zhao Fan pleased him well. The next day, events continued to occur at the auction, where there was a large number of guards. Looking at the monk, the ghost girl doubted that she could trust him, but the young man convinced her that this was all for the sake of the girl, because if after all, she did not have 5 young hearts, then she would never reach the third stage of strength. If the monk himself cannot get this magical heart, then no one will be able to do this. Looking at the monk again, the girl could not believe that he was so strong. Meanwhile, the auction began, and many people began to place their bids in order to buy a certain item. Feeling great excitement, rich people continued to buy expensive jewelry and goods that were present at the auction. But the main character and the monk were not very interested in this. They just sat at the auction and were bored. Unable to bear such boredom, the girl decided to ask how long they would still sit here, and when exactly the red agate tigers would be sold. The slightly sleepy young man replied that there was no need to worry about this, because only at the end are real treasures presented. The auction administrator exclaimed that the most anticipated part of the evening now began. And this was indeed the case, because one of the auction workers began to carry a certain treasure that was covered with gold paper. The first treasure turned out to be the only fire agate in the whole world, Fire always flows in this translucent treasure and it transfers heat when touched. After research, it turned out that it is capable of eliminating cancer cells. For the auction participants, this was truly an amazing treasure. Such valuables are equivalent to a lifetime, and they began to bid. Analyzing everything that was happening, the main character understood that in the eyes of these mortals it was an ordinary agate. But in fact, this stone contained the soul of the fiery demon king. Raising his hand, Zhao Fan exclaimed that he was betting 1.5 billion. People present at the auction could not believe what was happening, because they did not understand how some hillbilly makes such high bids, because for such jokes you can say goodbye to your life. The young man began to justify himself, saying that the people present at the auction should not judge him, because he was not targeting anyone at all. He just wanted to say that everyone who is here at the auction is just ordinary trash. The self-confident guy only asked to quickly finish this whole procedure so that he could purchase this stone as soon as possible. A bandit was also present at this event, because for the sake of this matter, the hero asked Lin Xiaoqiao to find him. After all, he could hack into the impregnable Swiss bank. After all, he now has 5-6 billion yuan. In addition to the money that Guang Shao gave, the Heavenly Master has almost 7 billion yuan in his hands. Although fire agate is capable of extending life, it is not as good as body armor for mortals. No one will buy something at that price. Only one of the men present exclaimed that he was raising the rate to 1.6 billion yuan. With 7 billion yuan in his bank account, this was not a problem for the protagonist, and he saw that his opponent only raised the bet by 100 million, which was too little, which is why he bet 2.6 billion yuan. This began to make the opponent incredibly angry. After all, Lao Tzu was diagnosed with cancer, and nothing could save him, but perhaps the fire agate could save his life. In any case, it was necessary to get it. Feeling very angry, the man shouted that he was raising the bid to 2.8 billion yuan, but realized that he had already reached his limit. Seeing that his opponent was trying to do something, the young man was only amused by this, and he was amazed that this was the limit of his enemy. After which, without hesitation, Zhao Fan raised the rate to 3.8 billion yuan. The auction administrator exclaimed that the final bid was 3.8 billion yuan and began counting down. As soon as the countdown was over, it was announced that agate was sold for 3.8 billion yuan. This outcome of events was unacceptable for the man, and he could not believe that the hillbilly was so rich, because of which Lao Tzu would not only take his money and gem, but also his life into the bargain. After winning the competition, the main character discussed with his friend that money is just a tool, and the life of the demon king is the only treasure in the whole world. Soon he will bother Shen Xiu's brothers to read a mantra for them. Since the girl, it will be much easier for the ghost to absorb all the demonic power. Suddenly, the girl discovered that not far from them there were several people who were watching them. Realizing that this was commonplace, the young man only said that he, the noble celestial master, had to deal with such mortals from morning to evening, and this was really annoying. Suddenly, an armored car began to drive out nearby, and they began to shout from it that it was better for Zhao Fan to voluntarily give the fire agate. As it turned out, it was Lao Tzu who lost at the auction, but now he wanted to get the fire agate with a gun in his hands. For the young man, this was not a problem, and he asked the ghost girl to deal with these scoundrels. Using her magical abilities, the girl could easily move straight to her enemies in order to strike from behind. Now, with a few blows, all the enemies were defeated, and they lay on the ground in an unconscious state. Seeing this fight, the man could not believe his eyes, and was incredibly shocked by what happened. Zhao Fan began to be indignant because he wanted the ghost girl to just punish the villains, but it was not clear why she killed them. The girl explained her action by saying that there will always be a grain of evil in the soul, and in everyone's body there is always a place of despair and greed. That's why death is death, it eradicates all evil. These words made the villain tremble with fear, and he began to sweat incredibly heavily because he was nervous. Deciding to repent for his action, the man knelt before his older brother and wanted to turn to him. Nevertheless, the main character decided to let the villain go, because he was terminally ill, and he only had a couple of days left to live. Suddenly, someone nearby started screaming, and Zhao Fan decided to turn around to see what was going on. The lifeless body of that same mortally ill man lay on the floor, and in front of him stood some very powerful magician, who destroyed the scoundrel. As it turned out, it was Feng Qingcheng, she killed this scoundrel because she just wanted to. The ghost girl immediately assumed that there was an enemy in front of her and immediately wanted to attack him. The young man instantly stopped his partner, and realized that at a young age, this girl's skills had achieved great success. There was only half a step left to reach the realm of the master. This is why the girl was sometimes called a half-step master, because she is a member of the Wind family, one of the 4 great families of martial arts. Just now at the auction house, Zhao Fan sensed Feng Qingqing's presence, and he assumed that she was now following him like some unlucky ghost to get the fire agate. At first this was indeed the case, but the girl already felt that her opponent had reached the realm of the master, which is why she did not intend to create problems for him, because Zhao Fan was an order of magnitude stronger. The smart boy was glad to meet him, and saw that the level of his opponent was quite high. Within a year, she would be on the same level as many masters. It is easier for talented ones to achieve success, which is why Feng must continue to study in order to fight with a stronger opponent. The girl only decided to thank her for such a noble deed, because she understood that she could not resist Zhao Fan. Thus, the problems were over, and now it was necessary to quickly return home in order to help the ghost girl increase her strength. Some time later, events continued to occur in Ling Qiaoqiao's house. The monk and the ghost began to meditate in order to absorb the demonic stone. For Ling Qiaoqiao, these were truly an unusual guest, and yet she wanted to find out what the bald man was doing in their house. The main character explained that this was his friend Shenxiu. He reads mantras here and helps the ghost. Using the Buddha mantra, Shenxiu began to use ancient powers, with the help of which it was possible to absorb the power of the demonic stone. And it really worked, because the fire demon began to break out in order to show its true power. The strongest monk began to suppress the demon's aggression, and restrained his power so that he would not break out. Meanwhile, the ghost girl herself was using an ability called the Rite of Life of the demonic king of purification. An effective ritual made it possible to absorb the powers of the fire demon in order to use them for good. Feeling very angry, the demon king began to act and used his magical abilities directly on the monk. Feeling that he could no longer resist, the Buddhist monk exclaimed that the demon king was attacking back, and it was too powerful to hold back the attack. Because of this outcome of events, Zhao Fan decided to intervene in the ritual and used his magical abilities to stop the Demon King. Thanks to the super powerful abilities of the main character, the dragon's energy was used and transferred directly into the body of a Buddhist monk. The dragon's energy combined well with the Buddha's magic, and the summoning of the forces of good was successful, which suppressed the demon. Thanks to the forces of good, the Fire King began to gradually lose his strength, and could no longer resist. Now the ghost girl had the only chance to absorb all the power of the demonic king and gain improvement in her magical abilities. After absorbing the demonic energy, only a death roar followed from the King of Fire, which signaled his death. With the help of a magical ritual, the ghost girl became much stronger, and she literally instantly began to feel a surge of energy in her body. The Buddhist monk himself was exhausted, and felt that he needed to eat the entire Chinatown to replenish his strength. Sighing heavily, the hero admitted that they finished quite quickly, although the Demon King is a top-class opponent. Unfortunately, the ghost girl herself did not gain the third stage of her power, but the energy that was received felt incredibly powerful, as if this was the limit that a ghost could master. The young man was also happy with this outcome of events, although he understood that certain actions still needed to be taken in order for the ghost girl to become stronger. Meanwhile, the future wife turned to Zhao Fan and told him that he had received a package from Li Sanjiao that afternoon. In this connection, together with his future wife, they decided to go and see what kind of jewelry his grandfather had sent. A few minutes later, the parcel was inspected, and what was in the box amazed the main character. The box contained a first-class spiritual stone. The great-uncle was too generous. Knowing that the young man would soon need to face a monster, he gave him the stone, which he had kept for most of his life. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth, fused together, without any impurities, is an item of the highest class. Looking at her future husband, Ling Qiaoqiao didn't understand anything, but the stone really looked amazing. Turning to his girlfriend, the young man exclaimed that he wanted to immediately begin absorbing spiritual energy, which is why she would have to sleep alone today. Hearing this, Ling Qiaoqiao was simply shocked, because she did not understand whether they could really sleep together. Nevertheless, these words made the girl extremely angry, and she literally began throwing pillows at the young man, shouting that she did not intend to sleep with him. A few hours later, night fell, and the main character began to prepare for the magical ritual. Thanks to the runes used, Zhao Fan was able to begin absorbing the magic crystal in order to increase his vital energy and strength. Having begun the absorption, the guy's entire body was covered with magical energy, which marked the absorption of the crystal. After absorbing the stone, the chance of victory over the demonic serpent is 10%. Tomorrow morning, Zhao Fan and his team were going to go to Shenangjia, where that damn snake was located. The next morning, the event continued to occur in the mansion, where there was a sick girl in whom the spirit of a demonic snake was present. The whole team was assembled, and the main character was ready to fight the strongest opponent of his life. The brother of the sick sister was surprised, because Master Zhao Fan said that he needed to properly prepare for the battle with the demonic snake. A couple of days ago he was not confident in his abilities, but now the guy dared to suggest that his strength had increased sharply. Zhao Fan simply replied that the Heavenly Master has everything under control. Besides, he is not going to die here, and there is no need to worry, because in a few days he will return his already healthy sister to him. Since these were the words of the master, the young man could be calm, and happily handed over his sister to perform the ritual. Looking at the car, the guy saw that it was designed for only 4 people, and in this case he could not understand where he should sit. The smart main character exclaimed that there was a special place for his brother in the car. This place was quite unusual because the guy was right on the roof and rode there all the way. After a long journey, events continue to occur in Shenangjia. After a long journey, the main character was very tired and his lower back was hurting, which is why he asked his younger brother to see if there was a house nearby where he could spend the night. Approaching one of the houses, the boy exclaimed that, in principle, it was possible to spend the night in this house, since it was the closest. The Buddhist monk was immediately confused by this house, and he realized that there was probably something wrong with it. Stopping his comrades, the monk exclaimed that this house had a big red door, as well as 3 wells nearby. According to Feng Shui, this is one of the 5 worst signs, which is why you should not go to this house. 3 wells and the big red door close the courtyard, and as a result, evil penetrates inside, and all the yang energy that reigned here turns into energy, and those who lived inside for a short period of time will not find anything. But over a long period of time, the evil spirits accumulate and become stronger. Later, at night, when everyone gathers together, the castle with 3 wells will close, and in the end everyone who was there will die due to the influence of the evil spirits. Since they were faced with this, they could not stand aside, and Zhao Fan asked his comrade to read the mantra, because it was necessary to call upon the dead spirits and ask them about what happened. The strongest monk began to use his skills to summon the spirits of the dead. As it turned out, a family lived in this house together with evil spirits, who killed them, but the monk could not call only him, he was only able to call 4 tormented spirits. It is unknown whether they still had memories of the past. Ask your comrade to rest. Zhao Fan decided to act, and was about to talk to the spirits. Initially, the hero wanted to fill these souls with dragon energy, and hoped that in this way they would be able to learn something. All the spirits immediately began to be filled with the dragon's magical energy, but reacted strangely to it. It was possible to see that only one soul did not completely lose its memory, the rest had already lost their minds, which is why they needed to be freed. In order to free the souls of ghosts, it was necessary to perform the ritual again, and the monk began to act. One of the souls still had their memories and could talk about what happened. Seeing this, the hero immediately began to ask the girl what happened here. The frightened girl of the ghost was called Yen Er. She could not remember how she died, because their souls constantly wander, they are like in the mouth of a beast, slowly losing their consciousness. Suddenly, it was discovered that the team was being followed, and someone was hiding behind the bushes. Having discovered this, the ghost girl immediately began to act, and approached the villain who dared to follow. As it turned out, it was a man who looked very suspicious. The summoned spirit immediately said that this was Brother Shun, they lived in the same village and grew up together. Although he cannot speak and is a little sick, he is still a very good person. For the main character, this was truly wonderful news, and he asked the man to answer questions about whether he had noticed anything strange in recent days. The man only began to answer this question indistinctly, making strange sounds. For the monk and his companion it was a completely incomprehensible speech, which was impossible to somehow decipher. Fortunately, the spirit knew how it was possible to decipher the speech of this strange guy, and said that Brother Shun the day before yesterday saw a man in a cloak come to their house, and locked it, after which he went towards the well. Hearing this, the young man immediately realized that it was necessary to act, and asked the man to show him the way. The tear-stained man began to shout something incomprehensible, and at the same time pointed to the well. Summoning his magical weapon, Zhao Fan realized that it was necessary to do something as soon as possible and examine the situation. Looking into the well, Zhao Fan experienced an incredible shock when he realized what was in it. As it turned out, in the well there was a certain creature called the lunar corpse. In the secret records of the Celestial Master, it was written that the lunar corpse was a dead man who had gone through a special ritual. The head was separated from the body and thrown into the water, the body was buried next to the well, and as a result, the head absorbed the essence of the moon reflected in the water. The lunar corpse, between the 7th new moon and before the full moon, begins to accumulate strength until it gathers its entire body into one whole. It is not a zombie, because it has a heartbeat and a pulse. It feeds on the moon's rays and gradually gains strength. The comrade immediately decided that it was necessary to break all the coins that were hanging on the walls of the well in order to bring the head of the lunar corpse to reason. For the main character this was no problem, and he immediately began to act in order to break absolutely all the coins. The Buddhist monk also began to use his magical abilities to talk to the moon creature. Magic beads were used directly on the well in which there was a strange creature. Immediately after this, the bald monk began to call on the merciful Amitabha to come and help them in such a difficult test. A seal immediately appeared around the magical bushes, with the help of which it was possible to clear the entire surrounding area. Under the influence of the protagonist's magical abilities, all the magic coins were instantly irradiated with magic, and thanks to the superpower of the ability, Zhao Fan managed to lift many coins into the sky and remove them from the well. The coins flew straight out of the air, and the young man began to fly after them in order to complete the ritual to the end. Using the abilities of the dragon energy, the secret rite of the Celestial Master's clan was performed. Using his superpower, the guy easily managed to destroy absolutely all the coins that had been in the air all this time. The fellow Buddhist immediately noticed that a demonic creature burst out to see what had happened to his jewelry. In order to get rid of this scoundrel, an appeal was made to the merciful Buddha in order to expel the lunar yang energy from the demon. Approaching closer, the girl's spirit immediately drew attention to the body in which the evil spirit was located. As it turned out, it was Brother Shun, who approached the team earlier in order to show them that same well. The man's spirit watched everything that happened and could not believe that this really happened. The smart protagonist immediately understood what was going on and began to act again. Touching the man's body, he immediately summoned from him the true spirit, which did not possess demonic power. Due to the call of the true spirit, the man's body immediately began to disintegrate, as if it was created from mud. In fact, Li Shun saw how an unknown person hung a lock on the door of the Taikan family, then they killed him and he became a lunar corpse. This body is a clay copy, the real body was hidden next to the well. This made the man incredibly upset, because he understood that he had actually died. After realizing his own death, Li Shun's soul evaporated and entered a better world. The young man continued to reassure the man, saying that he should not torture himself, because he would definitely spend his next life happily. The next morning, the Buddhist monk continued to perform his ritual in order to cleanse the area of evil spirits. Using the power of the Buddha himself, many square meters of the surrounding area were cleared, which made it possible for people to live here again. The barrier was destroyed, and each of those present in this settlement could calmly continue their lives. The monk also thought that he had already given the Buddhist rosary to Tian Yen, and released their souls with Li Shun. They could return again to this village and find the culprit of what happened. Still, they needed to continue to move on in order to find that demonic snake and save the innocent girl. Some time later, events continued to occur in the forest, where the entire team continued to move on. Suddenly, someone nearby shouted that he needed help, and the main character immediately reacted. Instantly, the brave guy began to move towards the man who was begging him to help. It turned out that people were screaming because there was a black panther nearby who was about to attack. The alarmed travelers did not understand what to do in this situation, and the brave man tried to protect his girlfriend. The panther could not stand it and began its attack, experiencing strong rage towards people. Fortunately, someone still managed to prevent the attack of the wild animal. Seeing this, people were literally shocked, because they did not understand who could be. Approaching closer to the travelers, the main character decided to ask them if everything was okay. Everything was really in order, and the stranger was surprised that the master was able to kill the leopard with just one pebble. His girlfriend decided to say that they came here to depict nature in all its glory, but unexpectedly came across a panther, which took them by surprise. For the young man, saving people was a mere trifle, and he did not even demand anything in return. A little embarrassed, the lady said that her name is Han Xiaoyu, and her boyfriend is Zhou Chen. They both live in Huzhou City. As a thank you, the girl handed over a jade pendant. It had been passed down in her family from generation to generation. She never found out how much it cost, but she decided to give it anyway to thank her. Seeing this pendant, the main character realized that he knew who it previously belonged to. After laughing, the main character immediately decided to ask if there was an ancestor girl named Han Pajun. After apologizing, Lady said that their family tree was burned during the Cultural Revolution, so she does not know who the guy is talking about. Zhao Fan nevertheless decided to give his phone number to the girl, and asked that when she returned home, she asked the elders if there was a person named Han Jun in their tree. After which they said goodbye, because the couple was very grateful to their savior for saving their lives. The protagonist's friend decided to ask him what he saw when the stranger gave him the pendant, as if it were some kind of treasure. As it turned out, it was the Jelan stone, which has quite unusual properties. The monk immediately had questions about what this stone actually does. The main character at the moment did not have time to explain, and he decided to show why this magic stone is so valuable. The smart Buddhist monk immediately noticed that yesterday they picked up these 3 stones that fell from Li Shun's body. These stones were stones of immortality. The soul that settled in them is able to regain its body and begin to live anew. This body will not age and will live forever. This is a true, heavenly destiny. There was free space inside the stone, so it was possible to store items there. And since Han Xiaoyu has a family heirloom, her ancestor may have known his heir, so he asked her to go back and ask her family, because in the future they will be able to see each other again. Still, the team decided to stop chatting because the demonic beast could not find itself, and it needed to be exterminated as soon as possible. Some time later, the team reached a strange cave that looked very suspicious. This cave turned out to be a natural reservoir. Its cold even gave me goosebumps. Most likely this is a special place for cultivation. The snake settled here and for a whole century absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to become stronger. For the older brother of the sick girl, it didn't matter what kind of monster it was, because he definitely wanted to kill him. Hearing this, Zhao Fan immediately stopped the guy and exclaimed that he must protect his younger sister. The rest, together with his team, will be taken by the main character, because they are much stronger than a simple guy. A few minutes later, they began to move into a natural reservoir in order to explore the area. Inside the reservoir, everything was completely different, and there was even a small lake nearby. There was a fertile land around. By cultivating here, one's strength could definitely increase significantly. Coming closer to the small lake, the shadow of some strange creature that looked like a snake was visible. Suddenly, a giant snake jumped out of the small lake, preparing with all its might to attack. For the young man, this was truly surprising, because even by the standards of the strongest demonic creatures, this snake was very lucky. The snake did not even listen to the people, and immediately began to attack, opening its mouth threateningly as it approached its target. After carrying out a crushing attack, an explosion of incredible proportions occurred, after which an ordinary person would not be able to survive. At the same time, the main character managed to use the golden bell, with which he protected all his comrades. The Buddhist monk also took actions to protect his comrades and achieve victory in battle. Using his magical powers, the monk could easily create a magical shield in order to protect his allies during battle and prevent them from dying. As soon as the shield spell was cast on the main character and the ghost girl, they immediately began to attack. The huge snake was ready for this attack, and immediately tried to counter-attack using its gigantic body. From the force of the blow, the attackers immediately jumped several tens of meters to the side and hit the rocks. It was really difficult to fight such a difficult opponent, even for such a strong magician as Zhao Fan. Even the ghost girl experienced great difficulties, although more recently she gained strength that even the gods could envy. The strongest opponent used the ice snake spear skill, with which he attacked the young man's team. Thanks to her dexterity, the girl and the main character were able to evade and continue the battle. Using his magical abilities, the main character remembered that the secret records of the Tianshi says that in order to defeat a dragon, you need to aim at the enemy. They are the source of power, everything else is a waste of time. The Snake King is about to turn into a dragon and they must stop him, which is why Zhao Fan ordered the ghost girl to attack the enemy's horns. The power of the earth turned out to be quite useful in this battle, as the girl used the earth control method and began to move the rocks. These rocks literally began to intertwine the body of a huge serpent, which prevented him from moving. As soon as the girl began to approach, in order to inflict another attack, the snake immediately removed the shackles made of stone, and using its magical horn, the demonic beast struck back, and hit the ghost straight with its horn. Due to the force of such a blow, the magical girl instantly began to disappear as her soul gradually evaporated. As it turned out, it was just an illusion, and the girl ordered the snake not to be so self-confident in battle. After another attack, it turned out that the snake was absolutely unharmed after a strong blow from the lady. Each attack literally angered the demonic snake more and more, and he began to confront a large number of opponents. During the battle, the girl began to think that she could not cope with the Demon King's 6 with the strength of her second peak. The Buddhist monk also began to help in the fight, and used a super strong ability called the Huge Buddha Palm. This Buddha Palm could not only attack, but also protect allies, which is why the comrade tried with all his might to help the team win. After thanking her ally, the ghost girl began to use her magical abilities to the fullest, and used the hidden technique of the demon ghost. The hidden technique turned out to be quite effective against such a serious opponent, which is why the snake even began to experience severe pain. Watching everything that was happening, an ordinary boy thought that he was witnessing how the gods were fighting. Using his magic brush, the main character summoned the dragon, and exclaimed that now it was his time to attack. This time, Zhao Fan used the technique of summoning the Eastern Black Dragon God and the Western White Tiger God. Having summoned such powerful creatures, the young man shouted that they should attack immediately. The divine beings instantly rushed into battle. In order to turn the demonic being, they tried their best to cause colossal harm to it. Using two divine beings, the evil demon's horns were broken off, and he literally could no longer fight. Trembling with fear, the demon showed his weakness, screaming with all his might, as if he was begging not to beat him anymore. In total, it took as many as 3 people with supernatural abilities to defeat this opponent. Now it was necessary to put Chen Chun air on the ground and pour snake venom on her. In this way it would be possible to break the snake spell. As soon as the girl came under the influence of the snake venom, a magical dark aura immediately began to appear in her. After the end of the battle, it was possible not only to cure the girl, but also to expel the evil spirit of the demon, which settled in the body of the innocent. Thanks to the actions of the protagonist and his team, the snake curse was destroyed. Starting to cry with joy, the young man exclaimed that this was truly an excellent outcome of the battle, because his little sister was saved. Touching his former rival, the main character said that he would take the body of this demonic snake, extract the inner elixir from it, as well as the soul of the demon and everything else, because these are very useful things. The team's task was successfully completed, and now they only needed to return home. Suddenly, something seemed to start moving in the water, as if there was another rival. The monk immediately noticed that something was wrong here and notified his friend about it. A huge table of water began to move straight towards the sick girl, who was still unconscious. A certain creature grabbed the girl and began to lift her up. Not understanding what was happening, Zhao Fan tried his best to save the young lady, and immediately returned to her aid. The brave warrior still managed to grab the girl by the hand and prevent her from getting into the water. As soon as there was a rescue attempt, a huge column of water rose on the water, because of which it was not possible to see what was happening to the sick sister. At the same time, the hero was already directly underwater, and tried to save the girl, doing everything possible. Trying to pull the girl out of the water, he only thought about what had happened. All this time, the girl was literally falling under the water, and did not even try to swim up to dry land. Some time later, the young man came to his senses and was lying on some surface. Looking around, he discovered an underwater palace in which he could breathe freely. Still, it was not clear where Chen Chun was going, because she should be somewhere nearby. Unexpectedly, Zhao Fan began to hear some strange sounds and could not understand what was happening in this place. Instantly a strange jug emerged from under the water, which was incredibly huge in size. This jug contained flowers, on one of which lay Chun air. Seeing this, the young man immediately realized that the spiritual power of the entire palace was concentrated in one place, and perhaps Chun was destined to be the guardian of this place. The flower itself created an unusual magical shell in which the girl was located, and it seemed that she was still unconscious. Soon after this, Chun began to levitate altogether, still in a state of sleep. The vase that emerged from the ground gradually began to shrink, which was not a very good sign. The lady herself fell to the floor, gradually sinking under the water. She still could not wake up. I understand that the girl needs to be saved. Zhao Fan took her in his arms and began to examine her body to understand what was wrong. In order to fully understand what happened, the main character decided to touch the girl's forehead. What he felt during the touch was shocking, because he had never felt anything like this before. The mortal man has absorbed the entire aura of the cold lake, and now it is at the alchemy stage. It is a rather cold spirit, which is completely opposite to Zhao Fan's spirit. The young man could not even imagine that she would be able to move to this stage. Many people have never managed to achieve this in their entire lives. It seems that Chun is destined to become the darling of heaven. Suddenly, the girl began to open her eyes. Finally she was able to wake up. As soon as Chun came to her senses, she immediately called Zhao Fan her father. This was truly shocking news for the guy, and he did not understand why he was called father. The joyful girl threw herself into the arms of her father, and the young man began to understand that she probably lost her memory after what happened. The little girl hugged her so-called father so tightly that she almost strangled him. This only made the girl laugh, and she was a little embarrassed by her action. In fact, for the main character it was a rather difficult situation, although he was glad that the girl was saved, but she recognized him as her father, and this complicates the situation. Some time later, the young man and the girl swam to the shore, and finally returned to land. The monk and the ghost girl were very happy that Zhao Fan was finally able to return to the surface. The older brother was also very happy that his little sister had finally woken up, and now she could live as before. For the girl, this whole situation was quite stressful, which is why she did not know how to behave. But as soon as the older brother began to approach her in order to hug her, she shouted that this man was bad and hit him. Not understanding his sister's reaction, the young man wanted to find out what was the matter, because he is her brother, as well as a fighter, but it is completely unclear where his little sister got such strength to hit with such power. Feeling awkward, Zhao Fan tried to explain the situation, and said that something happened at the bottom of the lake, and now her memory seems to be damaged and confused, which is why she recognized the hero as her father. There is an ice crystal storage stone inside her body, although it turns out that she cannot use her spiritual power yet. She is stronger than a martial artist and close to the strongest master. Looking at his sister, he could not believe that this could be true, because he could not reach such a height in his entire life, and his sister did it while she was sleeping. Waving his head, the Buddhist monk only said that fate has a very good sense of humor. In any case, the team needed to go back and find a way to help the little sister regain her memory. Unexpectedly, the girl decided to stop the main character and asked him to wait. Soon after this, the girl decided to use her magic jug to perform an unusual trick. The jug gradually began to increase in size, and there was some liquid in it that needed to be poured out. Using magic, the clever girl decided to pour all the water that was in the jug straight into the lake. As soon as the procedure was completed, the jug immediately shrank, making it possible to take it with you. The joyful sister only said that it would be better for the whole team, and she was ready to leave this place. For the main character, this was truly impressive, and the monk understood that this girl's body contained a very rare treasure. The elder brother was proud of his little sister, and believed that their Chun family would become the strongest in the future. After returning from Shenangjia, Zhao Fan spent the whole day alone, and after observing Chun for a short time, he sent her home. In the future he planned to help her regain her memory. Arriving home, the heroes felt incredibly tired, and wanted to use the meat of the demonic snake to improve their condition and strengthen their bodies. Unexpectedly, the old man turned to the master and introduced him to the little girl. The main character decided with interest to ask the old man Lao Fu where he found such a cute child. It turned out that it was his granddaughter named Yao Yao, and he asked Zhao Fan to take the girl to school today, because he had urgent business, and he really couldn't see her off now. For the boy this was not a problem, but for him, this girl seemed really difficult. Based on the girl's appearance, the guy immediately managed to identify that Yao Yao could not talk until I was 5 years old, and then she suddenly spoke, but since then she has a fever once every 2 months, and after 2 to 3 days she recovers. Feeling a little alarmed, the old man admitted that this was indeed the case, and their master was very insightful. Taking a look at the girl, even the monk revealed that she was a rare treasure of the cold jade body. Once the inner spirit was activated, she would be able to absorb the spirit of heaven and earth, and even breath. No matter what superior system this girl has, she is still the top of the universe. Having assessed the girl's skills, the Buddhist monk immediately invited her to join their sect and bow to him as her teacher. This was a really boring activity for the girl, because she believed that she should never become a nun. Addressing the girl, the main character said that he was just a descendant of his ancestors, and he did not have the qualifications to accept students. He did not need her to swear to him as a teacher, but he wanted to be her brother. Hearing this, the girl immediately assumed that the brother would protect his sister. If she was bullied, then he should protect her. This was not a problem for the main character, and he said that no one would dare to offend Yao Yao, because Zhao Fan would be the first to come to her aid. This made the baby very happy, and she immediately went to hug her older brother. The old man even began to cry from such a touching moment, because he could not believe that his granddaughter called Master Zhao Fan her teacher, and their family quickly became close in virtue. All this meant that Yao Yao asked Zhao Fan to be her big brother today. Laughing, the elderly man immediately began to leave, closing the door behind him, and the young man now felt deceived. Some time later, events continued to occur at Safflower Elementary School. The main character, who is a celestial master, was taking the children to elementary school. This was indeed too small an errand for him. But looking at this place, the guy immediately realized that something was wrong with him. The school looked really strange, as if there was dark energy floating around it. The dark energy was too strong, and it seemed that someone had set up an ominous barrier to force Yao Yao to rise and return to the ground, forming a dead cycle. There were some other oddities. Firstly, there were no other plants in the school except these red flowers, and this is unreasonable. Secondly, all the children in this school seem to be sick, as if they are infected with evil. Looking at the flower, Zhao Fan realized that Yao Yao was born with a rare spirit and body, so it does not affect her, but they should not enter this school, which is why he decided to pick the flower to take a good look at it. Some time later, the main character and his friend found themselves not far from home. A smart guy decided to plant a flower not far from his house in order to understand how it affects the environment. As soon as the flower was planted, all the plants nearby immediately began to wither, as if they had died instantly. Seeing this, Zhao Fan could not understand what was the matter and why this happened. This flower was evil, which absorbs life energy. The young man realized that this type of flower could absorb not only the nutrients of other plants, but also the essence of children when exposed to that barrier around the school. Some scoundrels dared to use the flowers of their motherland in this way. Tonight the main character and his team were going to go and catch the culprits. A few hours later, events continued to occur late in the evening, near the school. The whole team was assembled and was hiding on one of the roofs of numerous buildings. Looking out from under the shelter, the ghost girl discovered that someone was coming. As it turned out, the school principal was walking and holding a bag with unknown contents. At first glance, it was too vile a crime to install a barrier in the school and plant flowers that absorbed the essence of his own students. According to the director, his idea was excellent, because in a short time the ancestors of the Yang family would be able to achieve a change in supernatural forces and seize power in China. After the director took care of the flowers, he immediately began to leave. Seeing this, the young man decided to stop his comrade and tell him that he should not chase him, because if there really is a martial arts master in the Yang family, then they will not be able to defeat him even with 3 of them. Because of this, Zhao Fan ordered the ghost girl to follow the director in order to observe him from afar, but he could not get too close, because it was deadly. Following the orders of her commander, the girl began to follow the director, doing it in secret. To begin with, the monk, together with Zhao, needed to get rid of these ominous flowers so that they would no longer steal the vital energy of the students.